Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath with Forbes Breaking News. Iran fired around 200 ballistic missiles at Israel on Tuesday. Here to explain these breaking developments is Stephen Cook. He's a senior fellow for Middle East and Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Maggie.
So let's talk about these breaking news developments because this happened just within the last few hours. Iran appears to have fired somewhere between 150 and 250 ballistic missiles at Israel. Where did they fire? Are there casualties? What do we know?
So this was a major response to Israel's actions in Lebanon, including the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, as well as Israel's somewhat limited invasion into Lebanon earlier in the day. The Iranians targeted all over Israel, including population centers, mostly Tel Aviv and other areas, air bases, military facilities, and as I said, population centers. As of now, there are no reports of any serious injuries resulting from the missile strikes. The footage demonstrated that Israel's air defense system worked well, but there were so many projectiles that the air defenses couldn't handle all of them. And so there were direct strikes. It's also true that Israel's multi-layered air defense system determines through AI what is going to hit and what is an open area or the sea and doesn't target it. So right now in the early going, we don't really know. But in terms of injuries, so far, Israeli authorities are saying minor injuries, people falling, running to bomb shelters, people having anxiety attacks, but no major injuries. We don't know, though, about damage to infrastructure quite yet. Waiting to hear reports from Israelis. I'm hearing from Israeli contacts who are in their bomb shelters right now who say that for now things are over and they are safe and they're not aware of any major damage, and they're expecting a very significant response from Israel attacking Iran.
Your sources are expecting a significant response from Israel attacking Iran in response to this missile attack. Stephen, what would that response look like? What do you think it will be?
Well, when the Israelis struck back at Iran in April, it was a symbolic strike on Iran. They demonstrated that they could penetrate Iranian airspace at will, but chose not to attack infrastructure, including the country's nuclear infrastructure. I suspect this time out, the Israelis will not be that discerning and that they will make a very significant show of force by attacking Iranian infrastructure and even potentially Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The real danger here is that the Israelis make their point and then the Iranians feel that they have to respond again. And then we're in a kind of full-fledged war between Israel and Iran.
I was just about to ask, how likely is it that today's attack is the first step into what could be a broader, full-scale war in the region?
Well, it really depends on how the Israelis respond to this escalation. And I think that they'll likely try to demonstrate what they call escalation dominance, which is that they can escalate far higher, be more lethal, and do more damage that the Iranians couldn't possibly match it. And it forces the Iranians back down the escalation ladder. That's where I think the Israelis are going. There's no way that Iran can launch anywhere between 150 and 250 ballistic missiles at Israel without the Israelis upping the ante.
Now, you mentioned that this is in response to Israel's ground invasion in southern Lebanon and the killing of a Hezbollah leader. Is there the likelihood that Israel responds to Iran and also increases its activity in Lebanon?
Certainly. The Israelis have, over the course of the last 2 weeks, engaged in some spectacular intelligence operations to cripple Hezbollah, culminating in the killing of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah last Friday in an Israeli airstrike. And they have today also moved in limited numbers into villages in southern Lebanon, but also today it was revealed that the Israelis have been operating in southern Lebanon actually for some time. They are intent on pressing their advantage against Hezbollah, and now they will respond to Iran. These things are linked and not linked at the same time. Hezbollah being the central piece of Iran's axis of resistance, and the Israelis want to grind Hezbollah down so that it can't immediately threaten Israel's security. The Israelis are saying that Hezbollah was planning an October 7th style attack, and that is something that obviously the Israelis want to prevent or are aware of and have been trying to prevent, and they want to press their advantage against Hezbollah. Now, with the Iranian response, the Israelis are going to press their advantage even more, both with the Iranians, given Israel's likely significantly more technologically advanced missile forces, and what they're doing in Lebanon.
You said Israeli forces are saying that Hezbollah was going to plan an October 7th style attack. And I was going to ask you, it's October 1st. We're less than a week out from the 1-year anniversary. Is that timing a coincidence, or is it all kind of playing into the broader picture?
It's unclear whether Hezbollah was planning this for October 7th, but in the intelligence that Israelis have gathered over the last few months with their special forces operating in southern Lebanon, they claim to have documents to suggest that Hezbollah was planning some type of attack similar to what happened on October 7th, and that Israeli action has made that now impossible for them to carry out. It seems unlikely that the Israelis won't press their advantage against Hezbollah, and will try to sever Hezbollah's capability from whatever Iran's intentions are.
Speaking of October 7th, what does this conflict, this escalation between Iran and Israel mean for the conflict in Gaza?
Well, I was just in Israel. I left just as some of these events were unfolding, and the Israeli view of Gaza was that major military operations were winding down, that while there remains a significant number of Hamas fighters as an organization, it cannot threaten Israel's security in the same way that it did on October 7th, and that Israel will remain in and around the Gaza Strip to continue to conduct anti-terror operations. But the major phase of Israel's military operations in Gaza were now over, I should say, which really makes lots of talk from the White House and elsewhere about a ceasefire superfluous. The Israelis feel as if they're done. They're true to the word that they want to maintain overall security control over the Gaza Strip. They'll do that by remaining in the Gaza Strip, unlike the previous 18, 19 years after which they withdrew. So essentially, they're turning the page and moving on to Hezbollah and Iran. The Israelis are determined to dismantle the axis of resistance that now surrounds their country, and they've been fighting on 4 fronts at least.
There are reports saying that the U.S. helped intercept some of the missiles that were fired earlier today. What does this mean for the Americans' involvement in the region, if anything at all?
Well, this is perfectly consistent with American foreign policy, that the United States will help to ensure Israeli security. And just as it did in April, when it shot down, and has been doing actually in the Red Sea when the Houthis have fired on Israel, shooting down rockets and missiles and drones fired at Israel, the United States did help. Of course, with the number of missiles that were fired on Israel, some were bound to get through. The United States, as well as Israel, have warned the Iranians that a direct attack on Israel would result in severe consequences. It is 100% certain that the Israelis are going to respond, but will that be with the United States remains an open question. Regardless of what the United States does, regardless of what the Biden administration now counsels the Israelis to do, I think the Israelis are not in the mode where they're taking advice. They haven't been taking advice for some time, and have decided that they will ensure their security with American support at particular moments like April and just today, but will take action based on their own assessments of what Israel's needs are.
Obviously, these are breaking developments. Have we heard from Vice President Kamala Harris or her competitor in the presidential election, former President Donald Trump, on today's developments?
I'm not aware that the vice president has made a statement yet. The president certainly has. I believe that the former president has made a statement. I would assume that Vice President Harris will reiterate support for Israel's right to self-defense and call for de-escalation. This has been sort of the kind of thing that she has been saying and the president has been saying. So I don't really expect too much to be different. Of course, now that the Iranians have directly attacked Israel and the Biden administration has promised severe consequences, she now owns that policy no matter how it comes out.
How might today's events impact the presidential election? A lot can happen between now and then, of course, but based on what we know about what the administration has said, what former President Trump has said, how does this escalation affect potential election outcomes?
And generally, American people don't vote on foreign policy. There have been moments when they have, like in 2004, they did, coming so close after the attacks on New York and Washington in 2001. Because this is such a tight race, I think that Vice President Harris and the Biden administration need to be careful about how they handle it. Votes in critical places can swing a very, very tight presidential race, thinking about Michigan, Minnesota, or even places like Maryland, where the Senate, the balance of the Senate it may be decided. And there is a very significant American Jewish population in Maryland. There's also a very significant Arab American population in Maryland as well. So there's lots of places where in very, very tight races, either at the presidential level or in the Senate, which is quite meaningful now, how this is handled at the highest levels can have a political effect. It's so close, though, and I generally stick to policy instead of politics, that it's really hard to prognosticate on how this event is going to shape things in the coming 5 weeks.
Of course, and 5 weeks is a lot of time, especially in regards to this conflict. So let's bring it a little closer. What is your expectation for the next 24 to 48 hours? How fast might Israel respond? What can we expect to see in the region this week?
Yeah, it's just about 10 o'clock at night in Israel. I suspect that the Israeli authorities will be doing an assessment of what's been damaged and what hasn't been damaged, and then will decide on how to respond. I suspect they already have a menu of options before them, but this is something that will have to go before the Security Cabinet to vote on to take such a step. I expect that whatever the IDF recommends, that the Security Cabinet will go along with. Once again, attacking Israeli population centers, attacking Tel Aviv, going after military bases is, violating any number of Israeli red lines. If you remember back in July, a single Houthi drone attack that somehow Israeli defenses missed that killed a single Israeli resulted in a daylight Israeli raid on the Yemeni port of Hodeidah, a quite spectacular attack. The port burned for days afterwards. So when the Israelis promise a severe response, I think we're likely to get that in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. I know you are in high demand today, and we so appreciate your time and your insight on this matter.
Thanks, Maggie.